니들이 원하는 게 이거지? 가져가.
Little did the girl know, this would be the last game of hide-and-seek with her father. A group of intruders didn't just steal from her father, they stole his life. As his last drop of warmth faded, he saw his daughter's tear-streaked, grief-stricken face, heartbroken but silent. She held back her sobs, fearing she'd betray his final act of protection. She thought the killers would leave after getting what they came for, but instead, one of them sat down, on the bed. The girl was so tense she didn't even dare to breathe. Little did she know, they had already spotted her. Sook-hee was taken. To her shock, the man who stole her away was her father's most trusted friend. Blinded by loyalty, her father had shared all his ill-gotten gains with him only to be repaid with betrayal and death. And now, that same brother sold his daughter to human traffickers. Just when Sook-hee thought all hope was lost, a mysterious assassin suddenly burst in.
누구야? 얼마 받은 돈 5배, 10배를 줬.
But in a twist of fate, it was she who ended up saving him. Impressed by her sheer will to survive, the assassin, Yeon-soo, decided to take her in. Yeon-soo was no ordinary killer, he was a master trainer for a deadly organization. He raised Sook-hee as one of their own, using enemies as target practice. The rule was simple: whoever assembled their weapon the fastest, lived. A second too slow, and you were dead. For Sook-hee, hesitation was never an option. After all, she had watched her father die in front of her without making a sound. But when the moment came to pull the trigger, she froze. And in that split second, her opponent seized the chance. Lesson 1. Mercy towards your enemy is cruelty to yourself. Lesson 2. Endurance and survival. With their feet bound to heavy stones, they were thrown into deep water. Only after 5 agonizing minutes would Yeon-soo drop a knife, leaving them to fight for their lives. One by one, the trainees emerged, gasping for air, but Sook-hee was nowhere to be seen. After another minute, Yeon-soo finally dived in, pulling her up. As he prepared to give CPR, he realized she wasn't choking, she was completely fine. Turns out, she could hold her breath for 6 minutes. She had just played him at his own game. Over time, an unspoken tension grew between them. Years passed, and Sook-hee became one of the organization's top assassins. Her only wish? To avenge her father. When Sook-hee finally got the chance to capture her father's killer upon his return, she was burning with rage, ready to tear him apart. But the old fox was craftier than she expected. Instead of being hunted, he had set a trap for her. Face to face, their hatred burned hot. Yet, to her shock, the man scoffed, claiming she had been chasing the wrong enemy all along. He sneered, "I wasn't the one responsible for your father's fate. He was my brother. I'd never dirty my hands with something like that." Before Sook-hee could react, a strange noise came from behind. He sent a subordinate to check, only to find him with his throat slit. Tension filled the air. As they braced for an ambush, the ceiling glass shattered. Yeon-soo had arrived. As they faced off, both hesitated for a moment. It was as if they recognized each other. But Yeon-soo struck first. For the first time in a mission, he got injured, a cut across his sharp, handsome face. Even Sook-hee was stunned. Why had the ruthless Yeon-soo hesitated? She didn't dwell on it. What mattered more was that this man had saved her again and again. And just like that, she became completely captivated. She could no longer hide her feelings. And to her surprise, Yeon-soo, the ever-cold assassin, didn't push her away. He accepted. But Sook-hee made one thing clear: she wouldn't marry him until she found out the full truth behind her father's death.
복수. 이제는 끝나지.
아버지 죽인 놈들 따로 있답니다.
자네 뒤인데.
Yeon-soo's response? She never noticed the shift in his eyes, as his passion consumed her. Her thirst for revenge slowly faded away. Sook-hee and Yeon-soo held a private wedding ceremony, but during their honeymoon, Yeon-soo received an urgent call. with no choice but to leave his new wife behind. He rushed off to handle it. What Sook-hee never expected was the devastating news that followed. Jung-sang had walked straight into a death trap. Not only was he killed, but his face was so brutally disfigured that he was nearly unrecognizable. His second-in-command told Sook-hee that Jung-sang had already found her father's killer. As a wedding gift, he planned to take revenge for her but ended up sacrificing himself instead. Blinded by rage, Sook-hee vowed to avenge them both. With nothing left to lose, she stormed into the enemy's den, transforming into a goddess of vengeance. Fueled by fury, she became an unstoppable force, cutting through enemies from the first floor to the second, switching from guns to blades, every strike lethal, every movement precise. Then, she fought her way up to the third floor. Not a single gang member could stop her path of vengeance. By the time she was done, an entire building's worth of criminals lay dead at her feet. But such chaos was bound to attract attention. Soon, the police arrived, and Sook-hee was arrested. However, instead of being locked away, her deadly skills piqued the interest of those in power. The authorities had been watching this criminal syndicate for a long time, waiting to take them down. And then, out of nowhere, Sook-hee wiped them out single-handedly. A weapon like her was too valuable to waste. She was handed over to an elite division of the CIA. However, the first thing they did after transferring her was alter her appearance. When Sook-hee woke up, she had a new face. Panicked, she tried to escape, but as she ran, she found herself surrounded not by guards, but by ballet dancers in training. Still, she had no time to question it. Pursuers were on her heels, forcing her to keep running straight into a kitchen full of chefs in training. For a brief moment, she wondered if she had somehow ended up in a culinary school, but there was no time for confusion. She grabbed one of her pursuers as a hostage and pushed forward. The next exit led to a full-blown stage performance. To her shock, no one reacted to her sudden appearance. Even when she burst into a dressing room full of women applying makeup, they merely gave her an indifferent glance, as if this kind of chaos was completely normal. It wasn't until a short-haired woman stepped forward that something changed. She offered to help Sook-hee escape, leading her to what seemed like the final exit. They burst through the door only to find themselves on the rooftop. There was only one way out, a massive leap to a railing meters away. With no other option, Sook-hee followed the woman's lead and jumped, but in midair, the woman suddenly pulled out a gun and shot her. It wasn't a fatal shot, but it sent Sook-hee crashing down into a dumpster below. Looking down at her, the woman's gaze was cold. Her name was Kwon-sook, and she was the leader of this facility. Every rebellious newcomer got one bullet. It was their version of a welcome ceremony. When Sook-hee realized she was merely being used as a weapon, she, someone who had long since come to terms with life and death, had only one thought in mind. But Kwon-sook was more than prepared to deal with a hardened assassin like her. Through a thorough background check, Kwon-sook learned that Sook-hee had joined the assassin syndicate after her father was murdered. Later, her husband also died under mysterious circumstances. Though she seemed to have no emotional ties left, she did have one fatal weakness: the child growing inside her. Even Sook-hee herself had no idea that she was already 2 months pregnant. This revelation sent a wave of emotions crashing over her. The child was the last connection she had with Jung-sang. A woman who had once lost all will to live suddenly found a reason to survive. For the sake of her unborn child, Sook-hee was willing to agree to any terms Kwon-sook proposed. And Kwon-sook's condition was clear. Sook-hee had to work for the intelligence agency for 10 years. If she could complete all the missions assigned to her during this period, she would be granted a new life, one where she could raise her child and live as a normal person. With no other way out, Sook-hee had no choice but to accept. At the training facility, she wasn't just honing her combat skills. She was learning to cook, apply makeup, dance, and even act in stage plays, all to craft a civilian identity she could use for future missions. After months of grueling training, she finally gave birth to a daughter. Motherhood rekindled her hope. Now, she lived for the day she could meet the agency's requirements and walk out of this place for good. With that goal in mind, Sook-hee threw herself into training, excelling in every aspect, proving she was more than ready for the challenges ahead. Sook-hee soon received her first mission. If she succeeded, she would finally be allowed to step into the outside world and begin her undercover life. Determined to prove herself, She took this mission more seriously than anything before. As expected, she completed it flawlessly, eliminating her target with precision, but what she didn't expect was that the target's young daughter had witnessed everything. In his final moments, the dying man comforted his daughter, telling her not to cry just as Sook-hee's father had done for her all those years ago. A wave of guilt unlike anything she had ever felt washed over her. The tale of a hero who fought monsters, only to become one himself, had now become her own reality. But despite this moment of reckoning, the mission's success earned her the freedom she had long awaited. Kwon-sook provided her with a new identity, a home, and the chance to live a seemingly normal life with her daughter, though she knew she was still on call for future assignments. For now, she was happy. For the first time, her daughter could experience the real world. However, something strange happened. Sook-hee realized she was being watched. A man named Yeon-soo, her new neighbor, had taken a keen interest in her. From the moment she moved in, Yeon-soo had been captivated by her beauty. He found every excuse to interact with her, constantly showing kindness. But instead of being flattered, Sook-hee was on high alert. She immediately called Kwon-sook to verify his background. When Kwon-sook confirmed that Yeon-soo was nothing more than an ordinary man, Sook-hee finally let her guard down. As time passed, she discovered that Yeon-soo wasn't just handsome, he was kind, warm, and incredibly considerate toward both her and her daughter. Even her little girl adored the charming uncle next door. What made it even more uncanny was that both of them had lost the ones they loved most. It was as if fate had orchestrated their meeting all along. Before long, Sook-hee and Yeon-soo became inseparable. Even her recently reunited best friend could tell Sook-hee was in love. What she didn't expect was that her friend would unexpectedly be assigned to the mission with her. Their mission: pose as call girls and extract classified data from the target's phone. The operation went smoothly at first. Sook-hee successfully copied the files onto a USB drive, but when she returned from the restroom, she realized the target had caught onto her. Wasting no time, she launched a swift attack. Her opponent was no amateur. His combat skills were formidable, but he wasn't as fast as Sook-hee, who had been trained relentlessly to eliminate targets with lethal precision. Just as she was about to make her escape with her friend, the gravely wounded man suddenly lunged at them. In a split second, her friend took the fatal blow meant for Sook-hee. Watching her die in front of her, Sook-hee was consumed by rage. With ruthless efficiency, she struck back, ensuring her enemy wouldn't rise again. Though the mission was a success, she had lost her only true friend. Kwon-sook's cold indifference in the aftermath made one thing painfully clear: Sook-hee was nothing more than a tool to the agency. The brutal reality left her feeling utterly alone. Back home, she locked herself in the bathroom, trying to suppress her grief. What she didn't expect was to find Yeon-soo waiting for her. Not only had he taken care of her daughter in her absence, but he was also there to offer her the warmth and comfort she so desperately needed. At that moment, something clicked inside her. She wanted to marry him. Yeon-soo wasn't just someone who made her feel safe. He was the only person who could take care of her daughter if anything happened to her. So, she submitted a request to Kwon-sook. To her surprise, Kwon-sook didn't just approve it, she actively supported the marriage. What Sook-hee didn't know was that Yeon-soo was actually an intelligence officer assigned to monitor her every move. But somewhere along the way, as he watched her endure brutal training and impossible missions, he had fallen in love with this fierce, resilient woman. For once, Sook-hee wasn't unlucky. She had found someone who truly loved her, but she never expected to see an old enemy at her wedding. Kim Se-in. Back at the training facility, they had been sworn rivals, constantly at each other's throats. Kim Se-in had no reason to be there, yet she had received orders to stand by at her wedding, and soon enough, Sook-hee received a direct order from Kwon-sook herself. Just as the wedding festivities continued, Sook-hee suddenly received an urgent assassination order. Her mission: use a sniper rifle to eliminate a designated target from the ventilation shaft of the women's restroom. She was fully prepared, eager to take the shot and return to her wedding as if nothing had happened. But as she located her target through the scope, a shocking realization struck her. Stunned, Sook-hee struggled to believe her eyes. To confirm, she fired at one of his guards, forcing Jung-sang to react. For the first time ever, she let her target escape. It was also the first time she directly questioned Kwon-sook. But Kwon-sook's response was cold and firm. "Don't ask questions." Of course, Sook-hee knew how this game worked, But this wasn't just a target, this was the man she had mourned. The man whose death had defined her entire existence. Even as the wedding carried on, Sook-hee was lost in memories. She recalled the day Jung-sang's subordinate told her that he had been brutally murdered. That was the moment she had chosen revenge. That choice had led her here. And just when she had finally found happiness, fate had thrown her back into chaos. But the nightmare wasn't over yet. Jung-sang came looking for her. He showed up at her stage play, watching her from the shadows. A deep unease settled over Sook-hee. Nothing made sense. During dinner with Yeon-soo, Sook-hee remained on edge. The moment Yeon-soo stepped away, the man slowly approached her. From Jung-sang's cautious words, she could tell he wasn't certain of her identity. Her face and voice had changed. But to a man like him, anyone who posed a potential threat had to be eliminated. Then, Sook-hee spoke.
그녀는 목숨보다 사랑했던 남자를 잃고 그 고통을 잊기 위해 무대를 선택해요. 그런데 그 무대 위로 남자가 살아 돌아오죠. 그 남자를 죽여야만.
Something in her words made Jung-sang freeze. Recognition flickered in his eyes. At that moment, he finally understood who she was. And from his response, Sook-hee, too, confirmed the truth. This man was Jung-sang. Meanwhile, Yeon-soo was privately questioning Kwon-sook about why Sook-hee had been assigned a mission on her wedding day. But what they didn't know was that Jung-sang's subordinate had been eavesdropping outside the restroom and had heard everything. And soon, the entire conversation made its way to Jung-sang. Now, Jung-sang fully understood who Sook-hee was really working for. With that knowledge, he devised a plan. He needed to make the intelligence agency doubt Sook-hee's loyalty, subtly planting the idea that she was becoming unstable. To fuel the flames, he secretly recorded Yeon-soo and Kwon-sook's conversation and sent it directly to Sook-hee. The moment she played the recording, she knew exactly who had sent it. Sitting alone in an internet cafe, she listened to the voices, her hands shaking, her breath unsteady, and then, the truth hit her like a bullet. The love she thought was fate had been nothing but a carefully orchestrated lie. She had been under surveillance all along. Yeon-soo had never just been her kind-hearted neighbor. He was assigned to monitor her, control her, and keep her in check. Even their marriage had been part of the agency's plan. She was nothing more than a puppet. Sook-hee seethed with fury. She despised lies. She despised betrayal. Blinded by rage, she ran straight back into Jung-sang's arms, and as proof of her loyalty, she secretly passed him intelligence. Someone had been ordered to assassinate him. Jung-sang's manipulation had worked perfectly. With this intel, he set a trap and successfully captured the assassin, Kim Se-in. But even in her hatred, she had never once considered betraying a fellow agent. It wasn't until Jung-sang personally stepped forward, brutally torturing her, and revealing Sook-hee's betrayal that Kim Se-in finally learned the truth. It was then that she finally spoke. She wanted revenge on Sook-hee. With intel leaked and Kim Se-in compromised, Sook-hee was the prime suspect. But as she was being transported, Jung-sang made his move. His men ambushed the intelligence agency's convoy, successfully extracting Sook-hee. And this time, Jung-sang himself was the one who came to save her. All her doubts seemed to vanish. All she could think about now was one thing: her daughter. It was as if Jung-sang had anticipated this. He handed her a gun. Be careful. But the moment she arrived, the entire building exploded. Yeon-soo plunged from the upper floor, clutching their daughter in his arms. When Sook-hee rushed over, her first concern was her daughter's safety. But the fatal impact had already claimed the child's life. In his final moments, Yeon-soo tried to say something to Sook-hee, but his injuries were too severe, and he died with unspoken words and deep regret. Sook-hee wanted to question Yeon-soo about the real culprit behind the attack, but it was too late. His answers died with him. Overwhelmed with grief, she quickly pieced together the only possibility. The only person ruthless enough to do this was Kwon-sook. She had warned Sook-hee before, if she ever tried to escape, both she and her daughter would meet a gruesome end. Fueled by rage, Sook-hee stormed into Kwon-sook's office, demanding answers. But instead of arguing, Kwon-sook silently pulled up the security footage. As the video played, the horrifying truth unfolded before Sook-hee's eyes. The real mastermind wasn't Kwon-sook, it was Jung-sang. After Yeon-soo brought their daughter home, Jung-sang's subordinates were already lying in ambush. Realizing there was no way out, Yeon-soo desperately pleaded with Jung-sang to spare the child's life. Then, in a final act of defiance, he seized a phone and told Jung-sang the truth. The girl was his own flesh and blood. But Jung-sang didn't care, not even a flicker of hesitation. Meanwhile, Kim Se-in, the traitor, was also doomed to a gruesome fate.
설치 끝났습니다.
The most hateful part was that he had meticulously planned everything just to destroy Sook-hee. By the time she arrived, he ordered his men to detonate the bomb, ensuring that both of her loved ones died right before her eyes, all to ignite Sook-hee's fury and redirect her hatred toward the CIA. Jung-sang was never just a trainer for assassins, he was the true mastermind behind it all. But Jung-sang had miscalculated one thing: the CIA always kept a backup plan. One small oversight had led Sook-hee straight to the truth. She handed Sook-hee a recorded conversation between herself and Yeon-soo. In that moment, Sook-hee finally realized who truly loved her.
숙희야, 남은 평생 손에 피 묻히며 살게 할 순 없어요.
The man who kept saving her was the one who had been using her all along. Right and wrong, love and deception, it all blurred into a twisted mess. But one thing was certain: Sook-hee would destroy everything. The same scene plays out, but this time, the revenge is personal. The target is her ex-husband. When Sook-hee finally confronts Jung-sang, she demands answers, but Jung-sang doesn't even bother pretending anymore. He admits everything. This was all his design, a master plan to groom the perfect assassin, one who would follow his orders without question.
널 만든 건 나니까.
지금 보여줄게. 당신이 날 어떻게 만들었는지.
Emotions are a deadly weakness for a female assassin. A gun was within her reach, yet she chose a blade, an instinct that gave Jung-sang the perfect chance to escape. Their fight escalates, tumbling from the upper floors and crashing onto a car below. But Jung-sang doesn't stop. Without hesitation, he and his men make a swift getaway. Sook-hee gives chase, but just as she rushes forward, a driver unintentionally slams into her. But when she saw Jung-sang escaping, he actually ordered his men to drive straight into her. At that moment, Sook-hee completely lost all hope. Jung-sang wasn't just running, he wanted her dead. Without hesitation, she turns, jumps into the wrecked car, and speeds after them. Betrayal, manipulation, deception. Jung-sang had used every dirty trick in the book, fueled by pure hatred. Sook-hee ignores the pain surging through her body. With adrenaline pumping, she charges straight into their getaway vehicle, ready to unleash hell. But by the end of the bloodbath, she's completely drained. Jung-sang launched a ruthless backstab attack on Sook-hee. If she was going down, she was taking him with her. With a single swing, she hacked off old Choi's arm, sending their vehicle into total chaos. It spun out of control, slamming into another car, causing a massive bus to topple over. Bodies flew in every direction. Miraculously, both Sook-hee and Jung-sang were still alive, but he was barely holding on. His defeat was inevitable. However, desperate to survive, Jung-sang continued to manipulate Sook-hee.
내리쳐라. 나를 죽여라. 그래 뭐 그때부터 시작될 게다. 진짜 고통.
And for a moment, it worked. She hesitated, but then he whistled, that same damn whistle. Jung-sang was the one she had been searching for all along. He was her father's true murderer. He molded her into a weapon, used her, betrayed her, and made her believe he was her mentor, her lover, her family. And in the end, all she got was deception, manipulation, and betrayal, a web of lies, endless exploitation, and the ruthless control of the CIA. This was how they had forged the ultimate killing machine, one with no emotions left.